when many Cameroonians thought the corruption paralysis making way of being found a new cure, it's unfortunate as the canker keeps crippling itself and eating deep into the economy and making far-reaching dangerous consequences. The latest report from the Anti-Corruption Commission, CONAC, says Cameroon lost over 44 billion CFA francs to corruption practices and practices related as such in 2022. Now, this ups from 17.6 billion that was recorded in 2020. And now, CONAC says the corruption practice is carried out mainly in government circles, but also on some private institutions, including some civil society organizations. Now, the Transparent International, in its corruption perception index, put Cameroon at the 34th out of 180 position, indicating that corruption practice in the country is on a very bitter rise. That is a focus on tonight's edition of the program, Mountain Echoes. Good evening and thank you for joining us. I am being joined tonight by a cream of very fine resource persons who have been reading through CONAC's document and also making appraisals on some government's operations that have been attracting corruption in this country. We shall also be looking at the church's perspectives in curbing corruption in this country as church leaders have been making pronouncements and also doing documentations and even actions towards fighting against corruption in this country. That's a program. My name is Yannick Fonke and I am welcoming you into this edition of Mountain Echoes. Thank you very much for joining us once again. Now, we kickstart the program by introducing to you those who will be constituting the panel tonight. We have on panel tonight retired Justice Charles Jose. He's a legal mind and has a wide knowledge on issues, especially relating to corruption in this country. We're honored having him on our program tonight. Thank you very much for joining us, Justice.
Thank you for having me here this evening with you people.
Right. We're definitely going to be hearing a lot more from him. We also have on panel tonight Reverend Father Siben Pascal. He is a priest of the Roman Catholic Church and one who has been reading through the church's perspectives and church's actions taken towards fighting corruption in this country. We're honored having him in our program tonight. Thank you very much for joining us, Reverend Father Pascal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yannick. It's a pleasure being here to actually articulate some points about this vice that is creeping and that has destroyed our country, Cameroon.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Father Pascal. We're also having on panel tonight Dr. Busi Ernest. He is a psychologist and academic. He's a lecturer with the University of Buea. We're honored having him with his rich insights on analysis, especially on issues like these. Thank you very much for joining us, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yannick. Thank you, my co-panelists. I think that we'll be discussing on very crucial issues because His Excellency President Paul Biya is talking about Vision 2035, and we cannot achieve Vision 2035 when we have corrupt persons in the executive, in the judiciary. Why not also in the legislature? I think there's high time for us Cameroonians. If we want to talk about nation building, if we want to be Cameroon, we have to be honest. Nation building is all about honesty. We have to be truthful to be Cameroon. And I think that if President Paul Biya wants us to move in this realm, we have to be honest. Leaders have to be honest. We have to be accountable. It's all about accountability, and we have to be involving and transparent to be our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. You will be hearing a lot more in the course of this program. But to kickstart the program, let us have an editorial on the CONAC's report. That's the 2021 Corruption Index report from the Anti-Corruption Commission, CONAC. This report, or the editorial, is put for us by Jude Mbako.
The third ordinary session of the current legislative year opens up in Yaoundé at Mist High.
Thank you very much, dear viewers. We want to apologize for the mix-up. We're definitely going to be bringing to you the editorial in the course of the program. Now, just to put you into steam, the National Anti-Corruption Commission, CONAC, has published its 2021 report, and it puts Cameroon as having lost the sum of 44.6 billion CFA francs. This it attributes to corrupt practices. According to the commission, a lot of investigations were done by CONAC through calls, research, and also interrogations, and as well it gathered some data from the final proceedings or the final sentences passed on by the Special Criminal Court and also the Supreme State Audit. The commission says about 7 ministries were flagged for having carried out corrupt practices in 2021. Now, this report comes again in the wake of another that was published by Transparency International that it put Cameroon at 144 out of 180 countries that carried out corrupt practices. This means Cameroon is the 34th most corrupt country in the world. Well, this leaves many Cameroonians confused. Why has there been a sudden rise in the corrupt, should say, in the corrupt money or amount that is recorded? Now, from 17.6 billion CFA francs lost to corruption in 2020 to 44.4 billion CFA francs in 2021. Well, this is a sharp rise, and that's our concern tonight. And I want to begin with you, Justice. Let us start with you. What do you make out of CONAC's report?
CONAC's report is just a routine which is carried out every year to give the rate at which they are fighting against corrupt practices and corruption in Cameroon. When we read through the recent report and we find a rise, there are so many factors that are contributing to that rise, because Cameroon is now facing too many economic and social issues which are disturbing the political and economic crisis we are going through, increase the rate at which the Cameroonians are suffering economically. And what usually happens is that the big fishes want to swallow the small ones. and so the canker worm goes round society, and people think that they want to get rich easy and rich overnight. You know, government has put into place CONAC as one of those instruments of fighting against corruption, and we are still to see precisely and most concisely how CONAC is helping in fighting the corruption. They will tell you their missions are there and they are doing all they can do just to gather information, send it to the presidency, and the presidency sends it to the various agents like the judiciary or the audit bench and so on, to see if some of those involved in these malpractices can be brought to book. And so you get all that bottleneck, time wasting, and as time is wasting, more people are getting involved. The more deterrent sentences that are coming out of institutions like the special criminal court, you know, it would appear every Cameroonian is just conscious of the fact and waiting for the time when he or she is appointed to a position and she takes her own chunk of whatever monies are found in the coffers of the state. So we see corruption cutting right across society. Every part of our society is involved. So the cry is generalized and the suffering is persistent.
That's really touching there. Doc, you've been reading through this report. What meaning can you make out of this?
Mr. Moderator, I want to say that it's an issue of lack of patriotism. And I feel that most Cameroonian administrators, when they have been appointed, they don't have love for their country, uncompromising love for the country. Because I feel that if you look at Cameroon from a critical perspective, we can see bad roads. Look at the ring roads, the Santa Road to Bamenda till today. The road is not yet constructed. We don't have good infrastructures in our country. We don't have good road networks. Ministers, when they are sick, they go to the hospital out of the country. That shows that the elements of good governance are lacking in nation building. Look, there's no accountability. There's no feedback mechanism in governance. There's no transparency. There's no efficiency and effectiveness in public service. So it becomes a managerial problem where people think that they can embezzle money. When you look at it from a critical perspective, people prefer to embezzle money in Cameroon. When they embezzle money, they go to prison and their family members enjoy the money. We have seen situation. I want to say that CONAC is just there to give the statistics to the president. But the truth is that CONAC doesn't sanction. If CONAC had the capability to sanction, I think that we would have reduced corruption in this country. I want to say that from a detailed perspective, the organs of government, we need what is called separation of power in Cameroon. When we have separation of power in Cameroon, that the judiciary can easily get into these facts, and also the legislature. I think that when we talk about people who have embezzled, parastatals who have embezzled, and ministers, state ministers, I look at the top-bottom and the bottom-top approach. When they say people who have embezzled, most of the times we look at only ministers, directors, and so on. Embezzlement in Cameroon starts even in the family. Corruption starts in the family, and it starts from the micro system to the macro system, and many at times even in schools. You go to some schools, you pay bribes for admissions and so on. That's corruption, because in our ministries we have the central government, and what brings corruption in Cameroon is the over-centralization of power. There's too much centralization of power, and there are no mechanisms there are no control mechanisms. So ministers, when you are appointed as a minister, you think that you have to make yourself rich. We have ministers in this country who have embezzled money, like the Ondongdong and the others. Take, for example, the former Minister of Water and Energy, Bazir Tangana, embezzled a lot of money. But I think that the Cameroon government have not given accountability to the people that the minister have given back the money. So I think it's an issue of tribalism. It's an issue of nepotism and people protecting people, and issues of godfatherism where people want to protect those who have embezzled money in this country, because the practice that people embezzle money in Cameroon, and at the end of the day they decide to stay in prison and they don't refund the money, it enables other people to keep on embezzling money. And I want to say that when you look at CONAC, Mr. Moderator, CONAC cannot find these people. If we had an independent board that was elected for anti-corruption, I think that it could have been better, because CONAC is appointed by the president. But I think that it is high time too that the president put a mechanism in which we do follow up. Because if you do supervision is very important. If we do surprise visits into some of these ministries and companies and so on, industries, we will curb the rate of corruption in this country. And there is a lot of money laundering. Many people have embezzled state funds and they have built houses abroad. They have luxurious houses abroad. There are no checks and balances, mechanisms to follow up. And I think that taking these people to prison on daily basis, doesn't solve the problem. We have to look for checks. We have to do checks and balances. 44 billion is money that can make Cameroon an Eldorado. There is inflation in Cameroon today. We don't have gas. There's inflation, we don't have basic commodities, and you look at the gap between the rich and the poor is very wide. And when these people have made it in such a way, there's a governance system that you make the poor keep getting poorer and the rich keeps getting richer, so that the poor will look like beggars. And I feel that President Paul Biya has the power. His Excellency President Paul Biya has the power to stop corruption in this country. Yeah. And if we have to stop corruption in this country, we need an independent board, because even the Supreme State Audit has no power. Even CONAC has no power. They send report to the presidency. And we have ministers in this country who have embezzled state fund for more than 10 years now. And the money is still in prison, no follow-up mechanisms. And everybody just wants to embezzle and leave. Everybody wants to embezzle and leave. There are mechanisms in which we can curb corruption in this country. And we are talking about decentralization. And I think that if decentralization since 1996 was effective, where at the regional level we can computerize our public service, because you don't expect that somebody is a divisional officer with a salary of about 120 or 150 or 200,000 francs, but he has mansions everywhere. And the rate of corruption is common among appointed civil servants. You are appointed, your salary is not up to 300,000 francs. You have mission allowances, you have all sum of money. But at the end of the day, you have buildings, you are living a luxurious life. There's no follow-up mechanism. I think that we need integrity in this country. And I think that the issue of corruption has to start in our schools, because we have to bring out morality in our school and the issue of religious studies in our school, to start preaching that morality, that altruism, where our citizens can be selfless. And when you talk about corruption, I want to talk about the institutions. State institutions are very important. When we feel that people are powerful than institutions, corruption is very common. Look like schools like ENAM. Schools like ENAM, School of Administration and Magistracy, I want to say that that is the highest school that has produced the most corrupted Cameroonians. That is a school that trains administrators, but trains people who come out and steal state funds. Most of the people who have stolen state funds in this country, ministers, they went to ENAM. And I think that we need stronger institutions that can sanction rather than stronger people. From there, we will be able to curb corruption. They have just given the statistics to the president. There's no follow-up mechanism. I think that our president has his prime minister. It is high time that they give the power of the prime minister to be able to monitor his ministers and see what is going. He's the head of government, but you see that he has no power. There are ministers who have power more than the prime minister of this country.
That's your opinion.
No, that's my opinion.
Right.
And it counts. There are ministers that talks directly in the presidency. That even the prime minister,
the prime minister is the head of government.
He's the head of government, but I will not call names of ministers here.
The minister of ministers.
I'm telling you that there are ministers that the prime minister has called for cabinet meeting. They don't come.
Right.
That's
all ministers are present in the October cabinet meeting.
So that's why we are saying that we are saying that they have to respect the office of the Prime Minister and the institutions. We are talking about the November session of Parliament that is ongoing, and they are talking about budgets. They are voting budgets that even parliamentarians are not even able to question ministers on the rostrum. And to tell you checks and balances of what happened last year, and they are voting for another financial year, budget for another financial year, without knowing what they did last year. Ask the Minister of Public Works, what was your budget for last year? What did you execute? And lastly, I want to say that the issue of corruption is rising in Cameroon because the executive is so powerful, and the other organs of government, they don't have the power for checks and balances. Right. So they feel that they can do anything and maneuver and go set free. So I think that if we can make a system whereby all the organs of government are equal, because we have a presidential system, and if we make effective decentralization, as Excellency President Pobia is saying, I think that we can curb corruption in this country.
Right. We have a decentralized unitary state, Cameroon, and with its many challenges. Now, the government of Cameroon, to say the least, has been doing quite a lot to fight corruption in this country. The head of state, President Paul Biya, instituted a number of instruments to fight against corruption in this country, namely the no-nonsense Operation Sparrowhawk to pick up those who are known to embezzle state funds. Also, the Anti-Corruption Commission, CONAC, whose role is set to name and shame corrupt officials and also present to the president of the head of state those whom the CONAC has found wanting in terms of corruption, and also for the head of state to take measures. We also have the special criminal court that is there to pass judgment on those who have been found wanting. We also have the Supreme State Audit. This is a bench at the Supreme Court, and also headed by a minister, a titular minister, that is supposed to question those who are carrying out government actions and also to minimize corrupt practices. But with the plethora of instruments set out by the state of Cameroon, nothing seemed to be working. Well, from 17.6 billion CFA francs to 44.4 billion CFA francs gives you a more than three-quarter rise, and it is very comfortable for one to say that these instruments seem not to be enough. And that is why I come with you, Father. In your own assertion, where could there be a missing link? What is happening? The government is putting in strong effort, fighting corruption. Cameroon used to be the most corrupt country in the world, but it has stepped up its game. But it appears it is instead shifting to the world. So what is happening?
Yes, Mr. Yannick, you see, a situation that calls for really examination, because despite everything put in place by the government, and we still have this rise in resources being embezzled, it means that there is something fundamentally wrong. And all of us Cameroonians, and especially Cameroonians who want the welfare of this country, should actually put our voice and talk out about this vice. The first thing I would like to say is that the corruption in the country has become so rampant that people have given up. And the church too, in one way or the other, they have spoken and spoken, and nothing seems to be happening. I would like to say that if you go back from history, the life of the church and this particular vice, a lot has been written by the bishops of Cameroon, and they have written pastoral letters, and some clergies like Samuel Clara wrote a pastoral letter on corruption, pointing out 7 things to the government that are not functioning. And one was bad governance, but yet the figure keep rising. So I would like to highlight the fact that as a church, our role is to continue to preach, continue to call the mind of the government towards particular realities. And as a church exists as the conscience of society, and as the conscience society, we are there to fulfill our prophetic role, which is to point out silently these areas government needs to adjust. I just think that people have made up their mind to continue to impoverish Cameroon, and they are bent, and that counts for the fact that these measures in place, they look for another way to beat it, and that's what we have now. This 4 billion is still missing in the country. So I really think that the head of state and the administrators who are responsible in the small money of this country should actually see themselves. They leaders are capable, are willing to fight this corruption. And I think that if they are sincere, they can fight corruption in Cameroon. Let us know cosmetic solutions. As my brother was saying here, you see, you empower CONAC to investigation, give you statistics. What about execution? There is no follow-up. Make sure that others from carry out the same act. They just left as required. So some of these measures please mostly cosmetic. They don't go and address the situation. Because like myself in college, I'm a principal. You know, if you have students who are from same thing. So I really think that we have to back again, because if we continue this way, then poverty, impoverishment, and misery will continue to be the church, and the leaders who are enough, who are have their feet on the ground. They have reached and they have not compromised anything when it comes to this corruption. They have spoken boldly and they continue. One day that will eliminate this.
Wow, that is the voice of the servant of God. Well, putting it there. But now let's come to the different efforts taken by it. And I think that Retired Justice, you've been very active. I mean, in your many experience as a judicial prosecutor in this country, you've come across.
I've listened to the other two speakers. There is the catchword here is poverty. Poverty is at the bottom line of all the corrupt practices that are going on. Good memory lane. I think in 85, being a civil service country, the whole economy hitched on the civil service. The commercial sector was yet achieved. We suffered salary cuts. We did not suffer. We went to the center. And it got to a dangerous point where people lost 2/3 of their earnings. These were the breadwinners. And it was our society. People could not send children to school, and those who were privileged be or the working class sat down. They were more educated, placed options. They had to work out means of survival. And when you come to survival, services now went on sale. Services government meant the rent to improve on the society were now out. And you start hearing of classification, the most corrupt department. The economy is suffering. Our debts are increasing, and this must be shared amongst whom? Only those who have to don't it to trickle down. So what has happened has private entrepreneurs decide to put their salaries. They like big will tell you our coffers are high. We don't have enough to contribute to everything. And so come to this country wanting to steal the fair or next sociality that was the whole nation. We cannot have to rely implementing what the loans were meant for. We use them to service other services of the state, like paying salaries and paying for what we consider urgent commodities, urgent needs. And even the urgent needs, we cannot, because our taps are dry. We don't have water to drink. We don't have electricity. Those are basic utilities, excuse me, that have to be supplied by the government. My co-panelists, you talked of too much centralization. When you don't decentralize, you choke the executive. And the executive takes all the powers and it cannot service the other services in time. So you bring in delays. All commissions investigate and they end up where? They decree creating institutions like CONAC, ANIF, the audit bench, and the Supreme Audit. All are affiliates and responsible to the presidency. These are all ministries or departments, institutions under the ministry. So you see the hands of the executive are choked. They are too tight. And so to study all these files and these commissions and come out with decisions so that they can be executed. The files could go faster if the investigation ended at the police or ended in the hands of the investigators, and the prosecutors went straight to do their job, and the judiciary as a unit take their decisions in time, would have been able to come out with more deterrent sanctions than what we are doing. We have noticed what people in quote we call dictators do. And at times we turn around and we are praising some of them. But they acted unconstitutionally and without the norms that are accepted by our society. But they were there to curb, certain overzealousness, certain grabbing, and so on and so forth. So, mixed up with all this, our crisis, as I keep saying, we have to face this particular situation of, look at the rate of corruption going up almost triple what we had just about 2, 3, 4 years back. And as we are going, maybe we don't know what the 2022, 23 report will look like. Mm-hmm. Yes, it will maybe skyrocket again. And so the earlier we sit down and start thinking of the way out, the better. Cameroonians should think Cameroon and know that they have only one Cameroon. Yes. We either fix it or nobody fixes it for us. Right. Corruption is as old as mankind himself. It's not a word of today. It has always existed because it means what? Favoritism, illegality, not being impartial, taking ethnicities in consideration, tribalism, all the isms that don't favor progress. That's exactly what corruption stands for. Mm-hmm. Yes. So we must accept that we are Cameroonians, love for country and patriotic, and we want to change. Because if you see the layman on the street and ask him, really, what is corruption? He will not give a clear-cut definition for the word corruption, but he knows the pain he is feeling. He wrote a concours or an examination, a selection examination. He thought he was the best. He was not selected because maybe he was not a man from the chosen group or from the chosen tribe or from the chosen school. Mm-hmm. Discrimination. So all these ills come together, and of course the germ of corruption can only be growing until we decide to take other steps.
So let me add something. I think that like the legal mindset is very, very interesting, because when you look at corruption, you look at the taxpayers' money, and those who pay this money are the common people, the suffering masses, and these members of government at times, sometimes embezzle the money. And when His Excellency President Paul Biya came to power in 1982, he preached on the policy of rigor and moralization. It was a very powerful policy during the New Deal government of President Paul Biya. And he was talking about fighting against societal ills, like the legal mindset, tribalism, nepotism, all the ills, and distribution of the national cake, equity, justice, fairness, fighting against mediocrity, because we see a lot of mediocrity in Cameroon, no meritocracy sometimes. That's why corruption is high, and the democratization of Cameroon. And when you look at corruption is high because square pegs are not put in square holes. You go to a ministry of public health, the minister they will say the technocrats are secretary generals. The minister should be a technocrat and have a background knowledge of that ministry. But they will tell you that there are professors and technocrats who are secretary generals. So I think that what brings corruption in our country is the issue that one and the same ministers are rotating. We have President Paul Biya in his end of year speech said the youth should be engaged in governance. Give power to the youth. There's too much gerontocracy and people are too tired. You feel that. How can they do effective? How can the elements of effectiveness and efficiency come in when you feel that you have ministers of their 70s and 80s, they are tired? And we know of ministers in this country like Bello Buba Magari, they have been there for ages. I don't know whether power work with some of them. They have been there for ages. One minister leave from one ministry, you embezzle in this ministry, you move to that ministry, you are appointed. So those are the issues.
That's your opinion.
No, those are critical issues.
Embezzlement, you don't have any,
no, those are the issues that brings about corruption. I feel that if we are able to put square pegs in square holes, people with integrity and morality will be able to curb the high rate of corruption. Because I feel that it's an issue of integrity and good conscience, like the man of God said. It's an issue of good conscience, because when you look at the Anglophone crisis we are talking, many people have embezzled. It's a money-making machine now. Many people have embezzled money as this crisis is concerned. And many people don't even want the crisis to end because they are making money on both sides. Not only on government, because there's corruption also with the combatants, the non-state actors. Most of them have contributed money and some of their leaders embezzled. That's corruption. And there are some people who want an independent country. People who cannot manage money, who cannot manage people. So I think that it's an issue of morality. It's an issue of thinking beyond yourself. It's an issue of altruism. It's an issue of being selfless. Because the issue of corruption is selfishness, egoism, psychological egoism, that people feel that they want to keep getting rich. They want to keep getting rich, they amass wealth, and so on, so that some people will come and be like beggars. And I want to say that, Mr. Moderator, there's high corruption in the executive. And if you go to some big companies like Sonera and so on, there's high corruption there. Because you don't even know the salary of most of these persons in parastatals. You don't know their salaries. If you ask me to tell you the salary of a minister in this country, I don't know. We are supposed to know the salary of ministers. Why not the president? And I think that one thing that can help us look into the issue of corruption is let people show their assets. We should be able to have a balance sheet of their asset before they are appointed. So it's very, very important. Right. It's in the law. It's enshrined in the law and constitution.
Article 66 of the Constitution.
It's very important.
States that all public servants must declare their assets before.
But public servants are the richest in Cameroon. In other countries, it's not like that. In Cameroon, public servants are instead the richest people. It's because of our system, our mixed system. We need a capitalist economy. Right. And it will help curb the rate of corruption.
So you have to be working towards becoming the president of this country, so you can implement that. Let me give some statistics, and then we can pick up from there. Father Siben will say, and then Justice, you say something. Now, according to CONAC, these are the particular sectors that were propped into. But first of all, CONAC made it very clear that it had 20 more institutions than it had in 2020. 20 more institutions that it propped into and found it wanted, meaning that CONAC stepped its game in terms of investigation. Now, these are the ministries that CONAC found wanting in terms of corruption in 2021. The territorial administration, decentralization, that's decentralized territorial communities, that's councils, local councils, the Ministry of Trade, Land and Social Affairs. I don't know what Social Affairs is doing here. Education, finance, that especially the customs, is specified, especially customs and taxes, treasury. And it also says here, law enforcement officers, that's the Ministry of Defense, forestry and wildlife, justice, transport, and health. These are the sectors that are found wanting in the CONAC's 2021 report, and it says that 7 civil society organizations were also found wanting. There is no gainsaying, and it is an open secret in this country that the law enforcement, the police, is the most corrupt institution in this country, and Transparency International has been very vocal about it through their various investigations. Now, looking at these, each time reports like this are built further, recommendations are made, why is the president not acting on these recommendations? In your own regard, I mean, or just articulate what could have been possibly done with this voluminous report, close to 300 pages. With this voluminous report, if it were presented in front of you, what do you think, what step do you think could be taken to make sure next year we would be witnessing a downgrade instead of an increase?
Yes, I I think that, as a moderator, the whole cause of this situation that we have now is because of bad governance. And those who put in place, like their ministers, they should be held responsible. And if they are not accountable with their resources, we blame you, the president. And so, for a president to be there for 40 years and things are not happening, is a clear sign that he has failed in so many aspects. And so, if he's not able to handle the situation, to do something concretely that will address the situation, it therefore means that the country will continue to lose a lot of resources. And he should take his responsibility. If he's still able to lead this country, you should look for ways that he can curb this particular vice. If not, let him step down. Because you cannot be the head of state and a thing like this, corruption, keep increasing. The barrister they mentioned about the sin that in every human community, we have things like this. And I would like to say that we remain human beings, and sin is part of that our own human condition. But the reality of our lives is that we should be able to curb sin in one way or the other. Meaning that when a year passes, we should be making progress towards the right direction. If corruption is increasing, it means that we are going in the negative direction. Right. And so there is no way you can say that, that this is, we should understand that this is, a human community. No. I would like to highlight the fact that we should actually be making progress towards a positive direction, right, instead of corruption increasing. Then I would like to also conclude by saying that poverty is a consequence of corruption. Those who are corrupt in this country, they do not involve themselves in this because they are poor. Right. It is, as doctor said, it is a lack in them. They just want to get rich. And that is why, because of that lack in them, they are selfish, they are dishonest, and that is why they want to grab what does not belong to them. Right. Corruption is just a shifting of the common good to the individual.
Yes, indeed. Father, we're going to have you talk a lot more, including the fact what the church has been doing to curb corruption in this country. This is Mountain Echoes you're watching. We'll take a very short break. We'll be back. Do stay tuned.
The Bishop of the Diocese of Buea continued his rounds across schools and colleges to initiate spiritual consciousness on the staff and students. He was on hand at Our Lady of Mount Carmel College this Tuesday for the inaugural Mass of the new academic year. Actions towards implementing the rites of Christian initiation of adults continue to gain steam in the Diocese of Buea. The Diocesan Formation Team is currently training trainers to facilitate the implementation. Plus, Caritas of the Diocese of Buea reaches out to the vulnerable in Geme, where they donated some food items and other necessities recently. Those were our top stories for today's newscast. Good evening, dear TV friend, and welcome to Divine Mercy Prime on Divine Mercy Radio Television. portion of our newscast with this story. Christians over the world have celebrated the 6th edition of the World Day of the Poor in Vatican, instituted by Pope Francis. This year's celebration at the Vatican took an unusual turn. Details of this with Father Michael Njomo.
It is a usual yet unusual scenario in the Vatican City as Pope Francis celebrates the 6th World Day of the Poor. Uncommon it is to see so many poor and destitute people assembled together at St. Peter's Square, but this day affords them the opportunity to pray with the Vicar of Christ. In his homily, the Pope called on all to avoid the marginalization of the poor, the suffering of others due to injustices, what he termed the Third World War.
Dicendo il Signore davanti a questa terza guerra mondiale. Che cosa si sta dicendo il Signore? E mentre accadono fatti di male che generano povertà e generano sofferenze, si chiede che cosa concretamente io posso fare di bene.
Later on in the day, the Pope had a common meal with all the poor and destitute people in Rome, as he does every World Day of the Poor at the Paul VI Auditorium. This World Day of the Poor with the theme, "For your sake Christ became poor," 2 Corinthians chapter 8 verse 9, the Holy Father invites all to reflect on our disposition towards the poor and an option to elevate poverty and suffering.
Celebrating the World Day of the Poor this year, Caritas of St. Patrick's Parish in Geme reached out to some sick, elderly and internally displaced persons with food items and other necessities. The donation took place during a Eucharistic celebration this Sunday, November 13, 2022, in the presence of the Bishop of Boya. Details in the following report. Celebrating the World Day of the Poor this year, Caritas members of St. Patrick's Parish in Geme took the initiative to reach out to some sick, elderly, persons with disabilities alongside a few internally displaced persons with some food items.
So we decide which members and for local resource members and for Caritas we decide who will make smile of a few less privileged people. And so we decide to go inside one small food care, one small contribution with the members of St. Patrick's Parish. But since we come out with some small give them touch from the need community. So for inside that Bible of the so we get rice, we get salt, we get red oil, we get Maggi, we put that together, so we get 10 of them. So we get the blind, we get the aged, we get people, and some internally displaced.
Receiving these gifts with joy, the beneficiaries rendered immense thanks to their benefactors.
I've been very happy from the gift they give me, all of them expect them. This is to remind me that the next coming time they will never forget me, because I'm going to put my contact number and they're not tracing me at the stay. So they'll come right to our house, come to see me. So I don't be that part of them.
This year's edition of the World Day of the Poor was celebrated under the theme, "For your sakes Christ became poor." Reflecting on this, the Bishop of the Diocese of Boya expatiated on the different types of poverty.
The message we have for Roma and Center for me this year, he make a distinction between two kinds of poverty. Some poverty, the first kind I say, now that poverty way, it make me for shame, where they kill with spirit. The other second kind of it be now Master Jesus Christ, his own poverty. And that poverty now the one way it set we free and it bring we peace.
He further encouraged all Christians to reach out to their brothers and sisters who are in difficult situations and cannot make ends meet.
Dear brothers and sisters, we will unite with brothers and sisters for inside prayer, especially the ones and within in difficult situations and within they find them difficult for make ends and for meet. At the same time, we will prayer, so may God continue for bless each and every one for we, as we strive daily for live according to his will.
The celebration of the World of the Poor this year was declared by Pope Francis on Sunday, November 13, to enable Christians make a personal and communal examination of self by reaching out to the poor and less privileged in society. Staff and students of Our Lady of Mount Carmel College have been beckoned to live a life of cooperation, obedience, and humility. The Bishop of the Diocese of Boya, His Lordship Michael Bibi, made the call this Tuesday, November 15, while officiating at an inaugural Mass to kickstart the academic year. Marion attended and now reports.
What a day at Our Lady of Mount Carmel College, Muya, as the students welcome the proprietor of schools in the diocese, who joins them to celebrate the inaugural Mass to kickstart the academic year. During his homily, the prelate encourages the staff and students to live as a family, where the students are obedient to the authorities in order to have a smooth academic year.
It is with great joy in my heart that I join you this morning for this Eucharistic celebration to thank God for the last academic year and to ask Him to continue to be with us and to accompany us throughout the course of this academic year.
Students of the institution feel happy to have the bishop around and note some lessons from the homily, while promising to keep the flag of the institution high by putting to use what they have learned.
From what we learned today is that always have hope on everything that you do. Don't be shy. Always make yourself for people to notice you. And from the bishop explanation, he's always there for us no matter the circumstances, and he's always there to guide us, to show us his love and his appreciation. So we should not give up no matter the circumstances. Even though the institution is in Munya, we should not give up. We should always try to push it up.
The bishop explained to us that when we commit a crime, we should not only think that going to Father to do confession, that is all that is required. We should also do something to pay back for the crime. We should also do something, like for example, when you collect something, you should be able to acknowledge that you have made a mistake. You'll be able to do something to work for the mistake.
School authorities feel great to have the bishop celebrate the Mass, which is one of the most important aspects that open up the academic year for every Catholic institution.
The bishop's homily was just so awesome, and it helped us as the teachers, as parents, as students, to motivate us, to make us to know that nobody is left behind as far as the Diocese of Boya is concerned and the education sector.
God is at the center of all that we do. For me, it's some kind of making us aware of the fact that we are beginning the academic year. We've started the academic year, and we've started it with God, who it's all wisdom, who is everything, who is at the center of our studies and every activity that we do carry out in the college. We must be committed to what we are assigned to do. The students are raison d'etre. We have to be committed workers, and the Christian touch of whatever we do must be very outstanding. So that that is what makes a Catholic school Catholic.
It is hoped that by the end of this academic year, students admitted into the institution will attain their purpose, which is to achieve a holistic education at the end of their stay on campus.
Students of St. Pius X College, Meadow Farms, showcased their skills and talents over the weekend in sociocultural activities during the inaugural Mass of the college. The various forms of the display shows the rich diversity which can be found in Catholic technical institutions. Matilda Bisson captured the activities in the following report.
An electrifying moment at the St. Pius X Commercial and Technical College, Meadow Farms, Limbe, as the students showcased their skills and knowledge to the Bishop of Boya and proprietor of the institution.
Electrical power system EPS class. So as you can see, this connection is a double lighting, and here double lighting system, and here you can see a one-way switch, double gang controlling 2 lamps from different positions. Here, as you can see, one-way switch controlling one outside and another one controlling one inside. As you can see, you can off and can on. And here, this is a circuit breaker, which is used to protect from electric fire. And this is what we have. This is our first workshop we have done since the Form 2 class.
The students held the prelates spellbound with their gymnastic talents in acrobatics and other inborn potential. Another interesting moment was when the students thrilled the chief shepherd with singing and traditional dances. The bishop seemingly looked happy.
In a bid to foster integral growth in Catholic schools, the administration, teachers, parents and students of the St. Joseph College Sase met this Saturday, November 12, 2022 to evaluate the learning and progress in school. More on this with Father Michael Njomo in the following report.
By picking up that uniform, because their names are child should go wash the uniform, and somebody should be sure that it is well.
It is the in local parentis at St. Joseph's College Sase. A meeting instituted in Catholic schools in the Diocese of Boya aims at evaluating the progress of some classes and giving an account to their parents on the various aspects of boarding life, ranging from the academic, social, spiritual, moral, and psychological dimensions of growth. In a meeting like this, parents express their grievances with their children and the administration, but above all, they also suggest methods which they and the administration can better use to nurture the students.
When these children leave here, when they go home during the holidays, and those who have phones, they are on WhatsApp. They have a WhatsApp group. For example, the language that they use their dear parents, people should watch out. Watch out. Because I noticed that with my boy in the Form 3 class.
During this meeting, the results of the classes are published and the names of the outstanding students are also made known to their parents. The importance of such a meeting cannot be overemphasized as the students themselves highlights its necessity.
It's important because it helps parents to come to school and know the welfare of their children, and also helps parents to know the difficulties what the children are passing through in school. It helps parents to have one-on-one contact with their children.
In meetings like these, parents often attend with their expectations and make necessary contributions for the effective functioning of the institution.
expectations were greatly met because I think all the salient aspects concerning life in the boarding environment were raised, and concerns given by parents were addressed by the school administration.
I was so disturbed when I came in the past, but I realized that so many people have the same concerns, and the administration too has our concern. They raised up most of the issues we had in mind. So I was also pleased to see many parents around, and I will also encourage them to make sure that they attend huntings, because it's an opportunity to dialogue with the administration and then to see their warden and find out what they are going through.
It is then the wish of the Catholic education family of the Diocese of Boya that through such avenues of interaction and learning, schools may become something beautiful for God at Liquid Pulchrum Deo.
Do not cause any form of distractions during prayers. Always pray before and after studies. Don't leave St. Joseph de Sase. Don't leave the Suma Legacy. Don't leave the Diocese of Boya. Don't leave the Republic of Cameroon.
Some 42 confirmandees at the St. Patrick's Parish in Ngeme have been beckoned to actively participate in the activities of the church so as to strengthen their faith. His Lordship Bishop Michael Bibi made the call recently while administering the sacrament of confirmation to the Christians. More on this with Gillian Yelinatata in the following report.
Taking up the commitment to be faithful soldiers of Christ, these 142 Christians of St. Patrick's Parish, Ngeme, received the sacrament of confirmation at the feet of the Bishop of the Diocese of Boya, His Lordship Michael Bibi.
Powerful God, Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, by water and the Holy Spirit, you freed your sons and daughters from sin and gave them new life. Send your Holy Spirit upon them to be their helper and guide. Give them the spirit of wisdom and understanding, the spirit of right judgment and courage, the spirit of knowledge and reverence. Fill them with the spirit of wonder and awe in your presence. We ask this through Christ our Lord.
With holy reverence and joyful excitement, the confirmandi walk up the aisle to receive the anointing with holy chrism on their foreheads.
I believe the way I've received the sacrament of confirmation is the way the Holy Spirit is going to strengthen my faith and my obedience. And the way He also gave me that sacrament, I'm very happy, and it's a pleasure for me to have it. I feel very good to receive the sacrament of confirmation.
I feel very good taking the sacrament of confirmation because I am now a soldier of the church. I am now a real participant of the church. I cannot participate in any activity I want.
Prior to the confirmation rites, candidates are called upon to do a thorough self-examination in order to adequately prepare themselves for the coming season of Advent.
Within the course of this liturgical year, we don't do for insight how we spiritual life you don't be. We don't grow for insight, we believe. We try to do the things and we God want we for do them as far as the Christian life be concerned. And of course, when we evaluate we serve, we will see and say a good number of things and they will don't do them where it be good. And we give a keep on for do things that will be good. At the same time, when we evaluate we serve, we will see and say some things and they will don't do them where you know fine for God in our eye. God did not condemn we, but God did give we the opportunity as we will prepare in the next 2 weeks for begin another liturgical season for entire church year. May we try to make sure so we improve on our spiritual activities and may we try to make sure so we do things where they go make them, may we believe in it grow. May we try to do things and we it will make we all for stop like God it true begin them.
Some of the newly confirmed make moral and spiritual commitments to remain responsible in serving God by joining prayer and action groups in the church.
What I intend to do is to join the group so that it can make me to know that yes, I'm part and parcel of the church as a Catholic member of the church. The lectors group actually within the church, because that's one of my passions that I love, so that I can know how to read more and more and to follow the words of God.
Back in spirit to the group to at least motivate others who have not received sacrament, for them to also attend their doctrine. For now, like it's 3 years, so they should attend their doctrine and also receive their sacrament.
The church now looks up to these newly confirmed Christians to sincerely uphold the teachings of God and be faithful pillars of His church by winning more souls to Christ.
An intensive training program geared towards the implementation of the rite of Christian initiation of adults has begun in the Diocese of Boya. The Boya Diocesan Formation Team began training at the Tico Deanery recently. Gillian Tatalienla with the details.
One of the resolutions of the Pastoral Week hosted at St. Patrick's Parish in Geme this year regarding the implementation of the rite of Christian initiation of adults in the Diocese of Boya. Members of the Pastoral Formation Team are on a visit to Tico Deanery to grant some training on the process.
This place to be St. George Small Christian Community. No, so then St. George Small Christian Community, don't you know? You want to contact them for explain to them people that when you can register they want for follow all the RCIA program so you want to tell them so that maybe say either we don't be Christian or we don't be Christian so they want to explain for them so that you want to evangelize them you want to pass on the gospel values to them so that maybe they decide now to follow your way of life.
Christians of Tico Deanery are quite delighted to be amongst those selected for the start of the training program geared towards the effective implementation of the RCIA.
I'm happy that the diocese selected us, like we mentioned already. So thank you and thank you and thank you very much.
The main objective for the implementation of the RCIA is to foster evangelization in the church, and this comes about through various rites, like the rite of acceptance.
Una promise for left all Gambi Palava. We promise. Una promise for left all controversial way bad, and we be against the thing we God you want. We promise. My brother and sister, them, when I don't bring these people them here today, when I bring for stand witness to them. When I promise for get us all one king and master, we be Jesus Christ. And I don't one for work, that's for ye. And I one that's for work for ye. We bring. When I ready for help them, for Sabi and follow Jesus Christ.
All in all, it is hope that comes January 2023, all parishes in the Diocese of Boya will be fully immersed in the use of the RCIA following the training which the Pastoral Formation Team is currently carrying out at the level of the various deaneries.
To follow Jesus, the rite of acceptance. To follow Jesus, I have decided to follow Jesus. Not turning back.
Many thanks to you, Gillian Yenla, for completing that story. That report brings us to an end of today's newscast. We keep you in the company of more interesting programs coming up next on Divine Mercy Radio Television. Good night.
Welcome back to Mountain Echoes. If you're just tuning in, we are talking about the anti-corruption fight in Cameroon. Well, corruption is taking a nosedive in this country and is getting many worried This as the Anti-Corruption Commission (CONAC) published its 2021 report, putting Cameroon to be at a very, very difficult position with over 44 billion missing in the coffers and found in the pockets of a privileged few. It says 44 billion lost to corruption in 2021, up from 17.6 billion CFA francs. Now, that's a question we're posing. How did this money get missing at the time when the state has instituted some very strong fight against corruption? Well, my panelists have been doing some diagnosis on what is happening and making great meaning out of it. But let's put ourselves into context on CONAC's report and the different efforts taken towards the fight against corruption. More on this in this editorial with Jude Mbako.
When Transparency International ranked Cameroon the 34th most corrupt country in 2021, it was not mere coincidence. Unarguably, corruption is on an exponential progression. The National Anti-Corruption Commission in its 2021 report says the state of Cameroon lost 43.947 billion francs CFA from corruption cases and similar offenses, up to 17.6 billion recorded in 2020. The report is a substance of investigations carried out by CONAC and the decision rendered by the Budgetary and Financial Disciplinary Council of the Supreme State Audit and the Special Criminal Court. The amount witnessed an increase of 26.336 billion francs CFA in absolute value compared to the year 2020 and 149.54% in relative value. To reach these conclusions, CONAC carried out a careful examination of 6,705 denunciations for acts and practices of corruption compared to 16,067 in 2020. That is 3,879 by way of administrative mail, 2,694 through calls received on its green lines, as well as 55 denunciations received through emails and messages via WhatsApp mobile applications. All these denunciations show that corruption is particularly decried in sectors such as territorial administration, decentralized territorial communities, trade, land and land affairs, education, finance, that is custom, taxes and treasury, law enforcement, forestry and wildlife, justice, transport, and finally the health sector. The National Anti-Corruption Commission also indicates that it received, as part of the preparation of its report for the year 2021, contributions from 28 public companies. That is 9 more than in 2020 when they were not up to 17. It also benefited from the contribution of 27 ministerial departments, 10 jurisdictions, 7 civil society organizations, 3 control institutions, 2 regulatory institutions, and 1 religious community. Despite these cooperative efforts shown by certain ministerial departments in 2021, usually cited in CONAC's reports as being major sources of corruption, have stood out for their total lack of transparency. They are the Ministries of Defense, Justice, Territorial Administration, Agriculture and Rural Development, Land and Surveys, Economy, and that in charge of secondary education. CONAC says the requests for information sent to them have never received a response.
Wow. Thank you very much, Jude Baku, for that editorial. And of course, that is CONAC report for you, put in summary in that editorial. Now, Father, let us come now to an aspect of moralization. I mean, when President Paul Biya took over power in 1982, one of his biggest policy that he resounded so well was rigor and moralization. Well, rigor, strong hand on state institutions and ensuring that they do the right job. Moralization, using your conscience to work. But, well, it sounds much like an irony now, because much of that is not seen in the state, in the government, in the different institutions that are run in this country. So what is going on wrong? And that is why Father is here, and want to find out from you, what is the church's role in a messy situation like this, when we have corruption, we have issues that touch the life of the local man in very different ways and in painful ways? How does the church come in to bring hope to the hopeless?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Yannick. I would like to say that we have to examine the situation vis-a-vis the mission of the church in the country. And the church exists in the country to help to form the consciences of the people. And the church does that in so many ways. And if this vice is still rising in the country, means that the bishops of Cameroon and all men of God, they have to revisit their strategies again when it comes to the formation of the conscience of the people. I would like to cite the example of the formation of the future leaders. Those in charge of bringing up future Cameroonians should focus on morality, honesty, truthfulness. And every institution of learning should put morality as a core value, as a core value, and try to maintain that every graduate or every student that comes out from that particular institution is found morally upright. So I think that that's the first, the formation of the future of the young in terms of conscience formation. And secondly, men of God, they have to intensify their preaching in areas of justice, equality, and also integrity. Because there are sometimes you get a sermon, the sermon is so dry in church, you wonder if this man actually is reflecting the life of the people. And so our preaching should be straight to the point, with courage and conviction. And so these are areas whereby the church has been doing it, but I think that we need to intensify it, because morality is something that will build this nation. And as we said, it is not because those who are involved in these corrupt practices are poor, it's just because there's an emptiness within them. That conscience is dead. And so, in a situation where we have dead consciences now in the country, what should we do? It's only through preaching and what we call conscientization. We try to call to mind the fact that they need to rebuild their self-esteem. And believe it, we don't know, there is still hope. Because if you go to scriptures itself, worse things have happened. The life of the Israelites, the prophets, they spoke, they did not listen. By the end of the day, they experienced misery, but yet God restored them again. And so the church has been preaching, the church has been talking about this particular vice. But if nothing is happening and things are getting worse, it means that the church should not give up in preaching and doing what is right. All what we need, the bishops, the priests, men of God, all what we need is, as St. Paul says, keep on doing what is right. We have been called to be the conscience of the society. We have been called to be the prophetic voice, and let us continue to doing it. Normally in life, they say that as human beings, we can be discouraged when we do not see positive outcomes. But with things of God, when it comes to morality, something is being done. God, we are registering some success somewhere. It may not be so glaring, but I believe that in a college, if you graduate 50, at least 40 of them will be upright in terms of well-built conscience.
Right.
And so we are making great strides in terms of conscience formation.
Right. Thank you very much. Now, Justice, in this regard, corruption is happening at the macro and at the micro level. We've been looking a lot at the macro level, but we should not also be very dishonest with the fact that even in our markets, even in our streets, even in our offices, we practice many forms of corruption. Why have Cameroonians become so corruption addicted that it fertilizes itself anywhere in the society it finds itself? Why have Cameroonians? Is it some kind of moral de-armament, or we're just seeing people frustrated and just being inducted into corrupt practices?
In law, we talk of phrases like equity, good conscience, integrity, morality, and goodwill. All this brought together, we are ruled by a political entity, political polity. So unless there is the political will to forge ahead, and forging ahead, we cannot be promoting forging ahead in the bad direction. We mean forging ahead towards meaningful progress, not just, building the mansions without a solid foundation, because they will all collapse. Not building in an anarchical manner, just planting things because we need some good town planning to have beautiful cities. What we lack in Cameroon most now is the political will. The political will can only be attained through well-trained politicians. I would say Cameroon does not have politicians per se. An appointment is not consonant to becoming a politician. A politician must be an elected representative of a unit. So when we have our leaders being appointed,
well, definitely,
apologize
for that.
I apologize for this. So, it gives the impression that we are not yet politically matured to rule ourselves. So we should build good political institutions, starting from our political parties. We should have trained politicians, because politicians have a career. It is not just enough that today they appoint you something like a minister and you become a politician. This goes to tie up with what my learned friend of the panel, the doctor, was saying. He said the right people should be put in the right positions, square pegs in square holes. But I will ask whether a minister of health, being a medical doctor, would be better than a politician being the head of the medical services in Cameroon. Why I say so? Because some of us saw independence, and it meant that we saw a bit of colonialism. When politicians were politicians, you had novices in medicine as ministers in charge of health. And you had novices in law being ministers of justice. And for the short time I have been serving as a legal and judicial officer in this country, 40 years, it is in record that the best ministers of justice we had in this country were non-magistrates or non-legal minds.
Right.
The reason is simple, Yannick. When you are a journalist and you are the Minister of Communication, you tend to become a teacher of communication than a policy maker. So you forget about the technicians who are the journalists in the ministry, and you intend to teach them what you think should be the right thing to do. Meanwhile, government has given you and made it possible for you to get this team of technicians to sit down and work, and you execute. That is the role of the politician. The politician is not there to sit down and formulate policy alone. I hope you are getting me. The point there is that you don't have to be a technician, a medical doctor to run a hospital. You need an administrator. A hospital administrator.
Mustn't necessarily be a medical
a
doctor.
surgeon, a gynecologist, or this. No. He has his team of doctors with whom he works as his immediate collaborators,
right,
who sit down and formulate the policy. So that's one mistake our country keeps hanging on for too long. They have made the thing become so technocratic. You must be a university professor to be made minister of, say, higher education, this. No. You need just good politicians who have the people at heart. And that is what we call the political will. Because he will be able to translate, send across the messages of the people from the grassroots. You, a university professor, you don't talk to the people down there. So you cannot really step into their shoes. You don't understand the suffering that maybe medical bills cost, because you see it from your technical point, and you know that if I went through this operation, it will cost this amount. But the layman there will tell the minister, who is a politician, that yes, we agree that medicines are very expensive, these experiments are difficult to carry, and they entail a lot of chemicals and monies and so on. But we don't have the money. So those are the situations we find ourselves in. And what has happened? The poor are getting poorer. The bottom is getting broader every day. The top is narrowing up. And all the monies, the people at the bottom are working to sustain those few up there. That is where corruption is taking us to. You come, I hear we cited, some of the most corrupt departments you talk of. Police, justice, and you name them. Why is it that they are corrupt? Why? Maybe you don't compensate work with remuneration. Why is it that our civil servants in Cameroon are the poorest? Meanwhile, we come from such a place endowed with natural resources in the Semak zone. Why have our politicians not sat down to think that why should our pay scale be that low? So they should know that that money they are meant to be shared proportionately to the population. One man can have all that money, Cameroon will still remain poor and corrupt. Right. But if you distribute proportionate to the work people are doing, they will improve on the quality of life of people and their morality.
Doctor, the corruption eats up the budget of the country so much that Cameroonians really feel the pinch in your daily lives.
We can see for that, and you see many politicians who cover it that is because of the crisis in Ukraine and Russia. I want to say that corruption is causing a lot of economic recession in Cameroon and high poverty rate in Cameroon. There's a poverty gap. When you look at the poverty index in Cameroon today, it's really high. At times I tell people that it's difficult for some Cameroonians living in remote areas, especially peasant families, to get 1,000 francs a day. It's very difficult. Not to talk of eating twice a day. Even somebody who is working with government cannot eat 3 times a day in Cameroon today. Life is so difficult because of corruption, and we have seen ministers who have embezzled money kept in their houses, and the money stolen in their houses, and money even burned in their houses. Why the common man doesn't have money? I ask myself. A currency is coming up, but it's not being the appreciation of the money is not there. There's still devaluation. And I still feel that we have seen situations that you see ministers who are running away from the country with huge sum of money. The issue of corruption is not only in Cameroon, it's common in the CEMAC zone. I've seen politicians in the CEMAC zone who move around with heavy sums of money while their citizens are in poverty. So I want to say that when you look at corruption, Mr. Moderator, it's a tool that politicians use to manipulate the poor people. And we talk of corruption, but many people are not enlightened in elections. And you can only fight corruption when you stand for democracy and you want to engage in elections. Opposition parties, on the other hand, you see some, they shy away from elections and so on. These are people who are supposed to be in parliament and talk to these members of, like the MRC. They came, they were so powerful, and now you cannot hear about the MRC again. They avoided the elections. And these are people who would have gone to parliament and put these members of government to task. And I want to say that corruption is affecting the country economically, socially, even politically, because corruption leads to political instability because people go out there. I want to say that if you look at the root crisis of the Anglophone crisis, even the remote causes of the Anglophone crisis, it's because of poverty. There's poverty. Some people went out because of poverty. Unemployment. Look at the growth and strategic paper and the poverty reduction paper. But corruption is still very high. Unemployment is still very high. Most university students go to school, they graduate without jobs. I don't want to say it's the educational system, but I want to say that corruption in Cameroon has been planted in such a way that the technocrats is a kind of bureaucracy. So when we have a bureaucratic administration, corruption will be common because everything is about the office. The office has power more than the office. And when you look at corruption in Cameroon, Moderator, you see that it's because of the system of governance that came from France. And when you look at the French system of governance, you understand that it's a kind of assimilation that we practice their system. But if you look at the indirect rule, the British system of government, you see that corruption is limited there because you give power to other people to work. And I feel that we really have to harness corruption by, if government is honest, we have to bring about this effective decentralization. And I'm looking at corruption in the sense that we practice effective decentralization whereby we have the regional presidents and they even act like governors. If we have regional presidents that know that we have the regional assembly, they vote their budgets. At the level of the region, they are able to raise their budgets and they are able to do their developmental processes. You will see that we will limit corruption because at the level of the governor, the SDO, they are tender boards. So people want contracts. We have seen situations where parliamentarians go to Yaoundé, they don't go to the glass house, but they go to look for small private contracts. And that's where corruption starts. When they go, they lobby for contracts. Ministers give them contract, but they go to parliament, they cannot perform their function because somebody have given you money. So I feel that my learned legal mind is talking about politicians. But the truth is that most people who are politicians today, some elected parliamentarians, they don't know their function. They don't know the text. Even decentralization has been put forth. There are a lot of mayors who do not understand the decentralization text. They don't know what they are supposed to do. They are the presidents of the regions, even they don't even know what they are supposed to do. And corruption continues. You just hear of a budget that has been voted, but you don't, at the end of the year, you don't know how the budget was executed. The money goes back to the people. So if you want to talk about corruption, we need decent leaders. We need moral leaders. Corruption can be fought by moral leaders. People who are moral leaders. Like if you talk about moral leaders, you can see people like the former Prime Minister and President of Tanzania. You can see people like late Nelson Mandela. We have people like moral leaders moral leaders are people who think about others. They don't think about themselves. So we need community leaders. We need the spirit of Ngabatu. I am because you are. You are because I am. Biti. We need that communal African spirit, Ujamaa. That you feel that you are working to be your community. The truth is that today, even with normal Cameroonians, if you tell a Cameroonian that let's do community service, let's do volunteerism, they will not accept. They will say, give me money first. So that is part of that. Is corruption has been inbuilt in even a young child. You send a child that go and buy me this, a child is asking for biscuit. So I think that we have to look at corruption from the macro level and the macro level. But I still feel that the governance system has a lot to do as corruption is concerned in this country.
Right. Thank you very much. And Father, in our house units, you know, Doctor has been able to touch some points that I wanted to bring to you. In our house unit, how should the parents begin carrying themselves such that they don't show signs of corruption in running their homes, in our markets? How should we relate to ourselves such that we don't show signs of corruption and then blame it on the government? At this very micro level, how should we limit corruption before we talk of the macro level?
Yes, Mr. Moderator, thank you. I'm happy that you brought in this dimension of the micro level. And it actually gives a very balanced assessment of our topic, because we can be thinking about this corruption only from the top, you know. And I really think that what is happening, all of us are involved, the macro and the micro level. And so there is a lot of blame game. We just blame the leaders, but without also thinking about how we practice corruption in our local situation. As you mentioned, the markets and within the family. I just believe that, let me just comment a bit about the politicians first before I come to that micro level. I just believe that we have very, very bad politicians, and the worst thing about them is that some of them are Christians. And there's a kind of a dichotomy between they have divided their political life from their Christian life. And so when they go to Yaoundé, no, I'm going for politics. Then maybe if I come back to Boya, then I can embrace my faith. So there is that dichotomy. But the church keeps insisting that there is morality within politics. You know, that you engage your political life with your faith, and that changes the whole dynamics. And also within the family life, Mr. Moderator, I think that parents are to be shining examples to their children. And the issue of corruption, especially within the family, you know, it is just for the parents to be honest and to be of good example and pay attention to their children, making sure that they do not bring home, especially those who go to school and day schools, no, They go, then they come back to the house, making sure that their children do not come back home with things belonging to from another child. I experienced that a lot in the secondary school there in down at St. Charles, CUIV Entrepreneurial High School. A child leaves school, gets to another student's back, get 1 or 2 exercise book, and the parents, they see it, they know that this is not what I bought for you, and you keep quiet. You know, it shows that already you are an accomplice in the act, and that if you don't correct that, maybe someone will say when they come and report to the administration will take sanctions. But if you do that, you train that child in the direction of morality. And what is happening in our markets is just because we Cameroonians have given up. When we see what is happening, I've given the statistics now, 44 billion missing. It saddens those who are struggling at the market. The impression that they get is, what can we do now? Let us also see how we survive. But I want to tell my fellow Cameroonians that there's a saying that it is not appropriate or necessary to continue to curse the darkness, but light a candle. Just within your own little store there in the market, maybe OIC or Central Market, just light a candle of honesty. Do business with integrity and honesty, and you will change the whole business world.
Right.
Yeah.
Very interesting. We live in a very surviving world, a world where everyone wants to do what they can to survive. And in this kind of world, the smart do thrive. And it is against this backdrop that many have turned out to indulge themselves in very, very difficult situations or difficult ways in order to make themselves survive. Now, in finding a way out of this, you know, the few honest people are seen to be the bad ones in this kind of world, in this world of survival. When you want to be honest, you want to do things, they look at you to be too stained and to be too bad and all of that. How do the few remaining good people in Cameroon, well, in 26 or 27 million Cameroonians, let's just give a rough estimate of maybe 1 million Cameroonians that could be good, how do they continue surviving, continue preaching their goodness in this corruption toxic country? I mean, going by this without any a lack of a better word, how do they survive this, Justice?
You see, it is true that a bad cocoyam spoils the whole pot of cocoyams that end up with the fufu, because you have the grains, it didn't pound well and it polluted the whole thing. But as you said, there are still some good ones. And our man of God told us that we should always have hope. Now it is this, with this few whom we can identify, we should try through elections, because we must go through a political system to come out. Vote for the right people. And how do you vote for the right people? You register for elections. Whenever there are elections in your community, make sure you don't sit on the fence. Take part. Let your voices be heard. Be politically conscious. Because if the society is not politically conscious, we cannot purge away the bad seeds. We must change the society through a system which modern society has accepted. We have accepted and we are embracing democracy. If we find out that that is the best way of improving on our lives, we should do it the proper way. Register for elections, get your voter's card, update your age through getting your national identity cards. In fact, be a proper citizen and attend public meetings that concern your society, and through those public meetings, let your voices be heard. Once you are not heard and you sit grumbling, nobody will open up your heart to know what is happening to. Now, like we are here in the presence of our religious leaders, I think the churches, especially in the northwest and the southwest, where we are hit most, have not forged ahead this question of religious knowledge. You know, we had the privilege of going through a religious knowledge society till we got to university. And when we hear that religious knowledge is no longer a subject featuring in our educational system, it puzzles some of us, because we remember that at the London GCE there was Muslim studies. The Muslims did their own Mohammedanism studies, so it brought them up to morally right. The Hindus and so on, because of our connections with the Indians and so on, was also a paper. The GCE results will come, you pick the one for which, if you were a Muslim, you wrote the Muslim paper. If you were a Christian, you did your religious knowledge. And you would imagine that a child has been brought up through a religious institution, through primary school, that is 6 years. Through secondary school, another 7 years. That gives you a total of about 13 years, right? So as you are getting to 21, your religious and moral education is such that can propel you through to a tuberous society.
Right.
And they just insist that no, religious knowledge does not constitute part of your certificate, it does not constitute part of your learning, and thereby throwing moral instructions to the bush.
Right.
This is one of the greatest things that has brought about this our moral decadence. You know, so our the politicians should take it up, and with our religious people should take it up, and we say that we ourselves should know that we are the only people who can help the institutions curb this corruption.
Right. Interesting. Gentlemen, we're taking a leave very briefly.
Okay.
Yes. Father,
Yes.
let's begin with you.
What I want to just say as we conclude, we concluding?
Yeah, we are concluding very briefly.
Just to say that money is good, but money is not the highest value in life. And those of us who think that maybe somebody is rich and the person is better than me, no, you don't evaluate life like that. You don't know the means or the path that he has taken to have that money. And we're talking about corruption now. I don't know if he has involved himself in corrupt practices. And so when you see him driving big cars and owning houses, then you see yourself practicing moral values, being integral. You see that no, you're a loser. Money is good, but not the highest value. So I want to say that people, Cameroonians, should learn to be contented, and they should have their own personal conviction in life, and also know that the reward for righteous living is not given here on earth.
Right.
There is something greater. And that is why the prophet Malachi in the readings of Sunday tells us that the day of the Lord is coming. And the day of the Lord will be a reward for those who have been faithful, and a day of doom for those who have been unfaithful.
Right. Doc, do you want to say something very quickly?
I want to say that I will not only say negative things about Reverend Dieudonné Massingap. He has tried Massingap, he has tried his best, and he's putting a lot of effort. I think that we should applaud his effort, but I think that they need other mechanisms to fight corruption, and his Excellency President Paul Biya let him go back to his philosophy of rigor and moralization. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And dear viewers, that is our program tonight. Thank you very much for watching, and hopefully you begin imploring ways of fighting corruption, even from your own conscience. I am Yannick Fomki Ntale. Do join me tomorrow for yet another edition of the program Mountain Echoes. Tomorrow we'll be looking at how to create wealth with moral principles on a very resilient society like Cameroon. We'll have financial experts here to talk about creation of wealth with moral principles. Thank you very much for watching. Good night.